All right, here we are back again at the Gill Athletics Connections Track and Field podcast. This is kind of a part 3 of a 3-parter that we've been doing here. If you haven't, if this is your first episode, go back 2 weeks ago. We had the CEO of USTFCCCA, Sam Seams. That's a lot of S words right there. Sam kicked us off talking about his background and what the USTFCCCA does and does for coaches. And then we had Tim Byrne on. Tim was named recently the Boys Coach of the Year from the National Boys Coach of the Year for high school through the USTFCCCA, sponsored by the U.S. Marines, by the way. We got to give a shout out to the U.S. Marines for sponsoring that. And here, kind of our 3-legged relay here, we've got our anchor. Help me welcome the Girls National High School Coach of the Year from St. John's College High School in DC. I haven't been there, so I'm sure I'm gonna have 100 questions for him. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Desmond Dunham. Desmond, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mike, how are you? Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we had a little technical. We had Desmond's not the IT teacher at St. John's. We had a little technical difficulty, but we worked it out, and I'm really glad we did because his video wasn't working. And so if you aren't watching, head over to YouTube and check this out. But when he finally unveiled his video, this big Penn Relays wagon wheel, if you know what those are, was right behind them. And I was like, well, that's a pretty good unveil. Or, I know you're in DC. I don't never really think of DC as a Penn Relays tractor, but is Penn Relays like you're either Penn or Drake? So, I mean, are you a big Penn Relays guy? Obviously,
we are all Penn Relays. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Penn Relays is pretty prominent and prestigious meet on the East Coast. So that's something that a lot of coaches are carrying rope to put this on top of their van on the way back.
Oh yeah,
if they're so fortunate.
Yeah. What is this wheel for? What did you guys win?
This is 2007. We captured 2 pennies in the 4x4, 4x8. We became the first U.S. American team to beat the Jamaicans in the same Penn Relay Carnival. So we captured the 4x4, 4x8. And then we came back the next year and won the 4x4 in 2008.
Dude.
Yeah.
Hello, man. Good Lordy. I was through most of my coaching career, I was a Drake Relays guy, and it's one of my most favorite. It's just, it's a different atmosphere between, I know they're on the same weekend and they're both relay meets, but they're 2 different meets, and both have their pluses, and both of them have their minuses, and both of those minuses are weather, by the way. Don't get fooled. It's both. Get it. But
Mike, I sorry to cut you off, but I attribute our first Penn Relay championship due to the weather, because
bad weather.
Bad weather. We train in all types of conditions, and it's through the adversity that you build that character and that grit and determination. So we had torrential rain pour, 3-hour delay in the meet, and the weather, the winds picked up, and the temperatures dropped by over 20 degrees. So needless to say, we were ready. We felt like we were not the best team, but we were the most prepared team, and we handled those adverse conditions really well.
That's what it's great about track and racing, because it's not necessarily the best team, it's the best on that day team. I love it. Well, I did get to go 2 years when I was the sprints and hurdles coach at Mississippi State. We got to go to Penn Relays, and we actually won a couple of we won the 4x2 and I think maybe a sprint med or something like that.
Wow.
But it's different. It's a whole different meet, a whole different town, whole different everything. But we're here to talk about you, Desmond. So we're gonna put a pause on the National Coach of the Year. Congratulations, by the way. I mean,
Thank you so much.
It's a big deal. When I look at the list of the state winners, so it's 51, I think, right? We do the 50 states plus DC. Right. And, it's names that I interact with and hear and see on a daily basis. They're the ones that are, putting out great training content. They're the ones that are winning state titles. So all 51 boys coaches and 51 girls coaches are like rock star. I mean, amazing. And then somehow, and I would never want to be on this committee because this seems like the hardest job in the world, they take those 51 for both boys and 51 for girls, and they come up with one National Coach of the Year. I don't know how. I don't want to know how, because it just seems impossible. So to come out on top and be the National Coach of the Year for the girls, man, that's a big deal. Did you expect this at all? Like, were you like, oh yeah, this is the year?
No, I was clueless, and I still am. I'm truly honored, like you say, for my name to be among some of the names that have already been previously awarded. I'm just truly, truly honored. I'm still kind of pinching myself because, I'm pretty humble, and I I have an amazing staff. I have an amazing team. We weathered, a major storm during COVID to keep our culture, and I attribute a lot, not just from this past year or so, but from COVID on, that we became a different team. We handled those challenges that the pandemic gave to everyone. I just think that we were able to recreate a culture that gave us a more dominant program.
I love it. Well, again, we're going to pause right there. Let's take a step back and let's learn more about you. Track obviously plays a role in your life. I don't know how many track coaches are out there that track isn't a big part of their life. Where does track coaching start for you, Desmond? And what I mean by that is, assuming you are an athlete, at some point in your mind, it had to switch coaching from something that's done to you. A coach tells you to go run X, or if you played football, told you to go run this play. And somewhere it had to switch and be like, oh, wait a minute. Like I could do this. Like this could be my career. I could be the coach. Where does coaching as a lifestyle and a profession start occurring for you?
Yeah. So I want to first just back up a little bit more. My high school track and cross country coach was my life mentor, and he was a father figure to me. And so it was when I first went out for cross country in high school. I only went out because I wanted to join the basketball team, and you had to either run cross country or play football. I was 128 pounds. I wasn't about to hop on anyone's pitch to play football, and so it's interesting. I ended up writing a book about this story. It chronicles my childhood, my college days, and also some pinnacle coaching moments. But during my childhood, I was always cut from my school teams. I was cut from 3 basketball teams, twice in elementary school, once in middle school. I was even cut from my middle school cross country team, which everyone gives that.
Yeah. It's like, hold on, man.
Yeah. But we had a ton of guys who came out for the team. And then it was my freshman year running cross country. It just taught me so much more about myself. It was also an outlet for me. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and so during that time, that's why I know Chicago really well. And but during that time, it was the homicide capital of the U.S. and so it was a really nice outlet for me. And again, I dealt with some things with my dad, who was an alcoholic, and so my high school track coach became this major figure in my life. So park that, move forward. I end up attending Howard University on a track and cross country scholarship. And very fortunate to move out here to DC. And when my mother dropped me off, she says, look, this is your shot. You're not coming back home. So I knew I had to make it work. So I just got embedded in the community when I was at Howard. Tutorial mentorship program I started, and a buddy of mine ended up saying, hey, we need a little help with a local track team. And I was just falling in love working in the community. And I was also destined to go to medical school. I was finished my undergrad in exercise physiology. I was still taking prerequisites. So I started working on my master's degree in nutritional science, but taking pre-med courses. Did biomedical research at IUPUI, and the list goes on. And I was finally about to do a medical program at IUPUI, and I started teaching and coaching, and I just kept getting more embedded in the community. And I'll never forget that my team actually did a going away celebration for me. I mean, tears are pouring everywhere. I'm giving hugs, and I mean, they're giving gifts. And I mean, I just absolutely love this feeling of changing and having such an impressionable uh, um, 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 just an impressionable, giving these kids an impressionable experience, shaping and molding their livelihoods. And so I ended up deferring a year, and I said, well, let me just stay in it a little bit longer. I also met a young lady who is now my wife. So that was also a little bit part of the picture.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah. And so I was teaching physics and chemistry at a local local high school, Archbishop Carroll High School, teaching physical science. And after that year of teaching physical science and coaching another year, I had a conversation with my mother, and I said, listen, I know you want me to be a doctor one day, but my heart is really into teaching, coaching, educating, being a mentor. And this is where this connects with my high school track coach and cross country coach, Chief, who somebody I wanted to be like. I wanted to emulate him. I wanted to do what he did for me for others. And so I was really shocked, but my mother said, listen, whatever you do, I want you to be happy, and I want you to be the best at whatever you do. And my mother is someone who used to work 24 to 28-hour shifts to make sure that my sister and I had opportunities. So when she gave me the green light on it, I mean, there was no looking back. I wanted to be the best, and being the best meant that I wanted to touch as many lives as possible in a positive way. And I haven't looked back since. I'm 25 years in now, and I'm still loving every bit of it.
What a good mom. I mean, everybody wants their kid to be a lawyer, a doc, you know, the
Right.
stereotypical things, right? For mom to say, you know what, it's not about, I didn't want you to be a doctor. I wanted you to be happy, and I wanted you to contribute. So if that's playing tiddlywinks or being a doctor or being a track coach, yeah, I love that you were on that path and you diverted. Thank goodness for the track community, you diverted to track, because, you know, I 100% wholeheartedly believe like track coaches, specifically track coach, not just coaches now, track coaches are some of the most intelligent, versatile people in this world, smartest people in this world. And I always say, like, sometimes I'll kind of jokingly say to someone that's a coach, and I'm like, you know, you could have done anything in this world. And I mean, cure cancer, go to the moon, like, you know, whatever you think is like the most brilliant things in the world, you could. And instead you chose to be a track coach. Like, you know, it's like, I love track coaches, but you could have, you know, done some amazing things. So I love that you were on that path. And then this track bug just bit you and kept you in. So we got to do two things real quick here, though. So one, we love shout outs. We almost named the podcast the Gill Shout Out Podcast. We need to know the name of this, just such an influential track coach for you. And then we got to know more about this book. I tried to write a book, and, you know, I'm from Alabama, so I barely got 2 words out and was like, I'm over. Tell us the name of the track coach and tell us the name of this book.
Track coach, Roosevelt Pulliam. We called him Chief. And I mean, he just demanded such respect and admiration, and just would give anything for his athletes. And so Chief Roosevelt Pulliam, and he's still in Gary, Indiana. He's retired from coaching.
What school in Gary?
He was at Gary Horseman.
Yeah. Okay. I used to coach at Ball State University, so recruited a lot of Gary, and of course, on the other side, Fort Wayne.
Very familiar with Roosevelt.
That's what I was waiting for you. I was like, he's going to say Roosevelt. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, that was our nemesis, and we did have success with beating Roosevelt while I was at Horseman, and I ran with some amazing guys. I ran with a young man, Anthony Williams, who was the first African-American 5K state champion in the country. I'll never forget when he received this letter from Ronald Reagan congratulating him. And then I ran with another teammate who was a 3-time 1-mile state champion, Eric Smoot. Sorry about this, but he went to Purdue. And
hey, I'm from Alabama. I love and hate everybody.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, so that was the type of company that I had at a co-ed school with 800 runners. I had a guy who won the state mile 3 times in a row. You know, his fastest time was 4:10, 4:11.
Yeah, I was gonna say in Indiana. I mean, that's
In
a
Indiana, yeah,
tough
right.
place
It's tough,
for high
tough.
school track
Yeah,
and field.
yeah,
Well, you mentioned Howard University. We're gonna get to the book here in a
yeah.
second. I love Howard because when you say Howard, I think of two things. One is one of my favorite hurdlers in the whole world, David Oliver, you know,
Oh
who
man,
went to Howard.
David is
He's
amazing. Yes.
amazing, and now he is just transformational with Howard's program. Howard's had a great tradition
Yeah,
of track
yeah.
and field and cross country.
He's
And
killing
he's
it.
killing it. Like, I'm so proud and happy for him. And then two, one of my favorite shows in the world, my wife and I are re-binging it. I binged it all. Now we're re-binging it, is Blackish. And so
Yeah,
when you say
yeah.
Howard, I think of, you know, Dre Johnson, the lead character, because he's, you know, he's
Oh
so
yeah,
proud of his Howard roots, man. I just like, as
yeah.
soon as you said it, I was like, oh, Dre, yeah, that's where Dre went to school.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
But DC is different than Gary. Now,
Yeah.
Gary has some city aspects to it because you're really adjacent to Chicago, but you're still in that Northwest Indiana farmland rural area. DC, I've never been there. So this is all off of TV shows. But DC is city through and through. I did have a good friend go to, it's Georgetown that's in DC, right?
Yes,
And
correct.
he was like, oh yeah, it's concrete. There's no
Yeah, right.
parks and stuff like that. So how did you, like, why Howard? I assume you had other I mean, if you got into Howard, you had other choices. It wasn't like your safety's the only school you could get into. It's not easy to get into Howard. Very academic there. So why Howard versus maybe some other options?
Yeah, so I didn't have a whole lot of options, but I do want to say that again, Chief played a major role. He said, "Hey, you're not going to the Olympics," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" You know.
So Chief kept it real.
Oh, he kept it real, and you know, and I'm that way as a coach as well. That this is not about, you know, this is not about you trying to have a professional career in running. It's more about life. And he felt like Howard was going to give me just a well-rounded experience. And so he taught us how to use running as a vehicle to in a platform to open up more doors for ourselves. And so he pretty much told me I was going to Howard. And you know, Chief is he's big, he's burly, he's you don't really go against Chief. So
yes, sir.
Right. Yeah, yes, sir. Sounded good. And I was so excited that I made that decision.
I'll say that obviously worked out, right? Yeah. Spoiler alert, it worked out, right? So,
Yeah.
tell us about this book. 'Cause I actually did write a book. I self-published a book about my transition from collegiate track and field to professional poker playing. So I actually was a professional poker player before I came to Gill. It was in the heyday of poker when everybody thought they could do it. I was one of those guys that thought they could do it. And so just kind of wrote a book. I was kind of on the early side, you know, now with YouTube bloggers and stuff like that. I was on the early side. I blogged my, it was all written blog, my transition from being in the SEC at Mississippi State to moving to Vegas, and then my time at Vegas. And so I kind of wrote a book almost as a, more of like a, hey guys, don't do that. Don't go pro and poke. Like, it's not what you think it is. There's a way better life, even if you're sitting behind a desk 8 hours a day. It's way better than playing cards for a living. But what I say that all to say that, you know, writing a book is not easy, whether you know that subject in and out, whether it's about your own life, which you know more about that than anybody. It's still hard to actually take all the things that are in your head and make them coherent on the paper. Tell us about this book and why, because I mean, you don't just decide on a whim to write a book and do it in a day. It takes maybe years to really get it done and done right. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I'll never forget, a little bit over a decade ago, I was finishing up. I had given a great motivational speech to my team, and a lot of times I would give these motivational speeches. I would talk about some of the obstacles and some of the adversity that I also face. I always, you know, gave inspirational talks and speeches that were relatable to my students, my athletes, and I'll, you know, never forget this one particular time I finished, and I had given a great a speech at the end of a practice, and then I had a young lady who stayed after the practice, and she was, you know, super pumped and inspired, and she says, you know, Coach Dunham, one day you have to write a book, and that always stuck with me. That, and you know, because what she was saying was that people need to hear, your story. People need to be motivated. They need to feel like they're not alone. And I think I do a great job with that with my athletes, letting them know, look, you're not the only one going through this, and so a lot of times I'm super vulnerable telling these stories to them. And so I remember telling my wife at one point, I would love to write a book. And she thought it would be a great idea until I started writing it.
Wait, did she think it was a great idea? She's like, yeah, go ahead, Desmond. You'll
right,
get this done.
Yeah.
Go. Yeah. This will keep you busy on the weekends. That's cool.
Right. Exactly. You know how it goes.
I've been married for 14 years, baby. I know it.
Yep. So then the pandemic hit, and we have two, lovely kids who are also soccer players. They both are in high school, and we were always challenging them on, having a project, having something to work on.
Right.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, they said, well, what is your project? They called me out.
They flipped it to you.
They flipped it to me. And so this book here became my pandemic project, Running Against the Odds. And it took me 18, I thought it was going to take about 8 months. It took me 18 months. But one of the things that I share in the book is that in elementary school, I was diagnosed with a speech impediment. I had a speech impediment where I was going to speech therapy.
Really?
I also have dyslexia. So
wait a minute, you ain't supposed to write a book. Hold on.
Right.
Just those two strikes right there.
Right.
Wow.
Yep. And so it was something that I've always wanted to accomplish. It was, anytime I've had any adversity or fear, it was something that has been embedded in me, being from Gary and all the other things I've seen, and feeling just super blessed that I wanted to also accomplish this for myself. I wanted to leave a legacy for my family, and I also wanted to lead by example with my own kids. And so, this book is dedicated to so many people for so many reasons, not particularly one, but yeah, 18 months. It was arduous. It was a laborious task where I was up 5, 6 a.m. You know the deal. Sun is coming up, and I'm still up writing, and after the kids had gone down. And so I'm super happy. It was an Amazon #1 new release. Wow. And it's still getting a lot of traction, lots of traction.
So is it autobiographical? Is it kind of your growing up and, the family situation? You mentioned your dad, and obviously a strong mom figure there. And I assume possibly other family and friends that help. I'm a big believer in that it takes the village type of thing. So there were other people that poured into you all the way through Howard, and then even through your coaching stops and medical and not medical school and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. So I'm capturing from, it chronicles my childhood, college days, and then up to a pinnacle coaching moment up to 2007. And so it's a memoir, and I'm talking about all these challenges because I want people to know, again, they're not alone when they go through things. They can use adversity as a springboard to allow them to push themselves into other directions in life, and really define who they are. And so super important I share that. And also it just shares my DNA. How did I become so competitive? How did I, become so passionate about the things that I do? And I don't sleep much. My family, my athletes are always on me about it, because I'm always thinking about what is the next thing I can do or accomplish, or how can I give my team an edge to become more competitive, better, have more opportunities from track and field or cross country. And so my wheels are always turning.
So who is the book for? And before you answer that, like I'm a track geek, right? My whole life, I ran it and coached it, and now I live it, 24/7 here at Gill Athletics. But if I go into, and this is going to be old school, if I go into a Barnes and Noble and I look at the running section, a third of those are, I'm not their customer, right? The marathon trainers, the even, great people who, I would consider peers, at least. I won't say friends, but like a Jim Spivey, who, I think he's a great guy. I love him. I see him at shows all the time. I'm not reading his book. I'm just not a 5K kind of guy, so not every book is for everybody. In fact, I would imagine you probably got counsel as you're going into the books process of, if you try to write the book for everybody, you write the book for nobody.
Right.
So who is your target on? Who should be some, there's thousands of people that will listen to this episode here. Half of them are not the person, but half of them are like, who should I get this book? Who is this book for? Who's your target? Like, what, if you're this type of person, here's the book for you because XYZ.
Yeah, you hit it spot on, Mike. Yeah, you try to write it for everyone and you lose everyone. And so, the book is written for upper middle school as well as high school age students, athletes. I use running a lot, but running is used quite a bit in the book from a metaphorical standpoint. So it's applicable to anyone who's even not a runner. I've also done a teacher's guide with the book.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So I'm starting to get this book embedded into curriculums, recommended for summer reading.
Yeah.
I just finished the Spanish translation. And then my wife and I are now working on an adaptation to the book, which is going to be a fiction based on a true story. And that's going to be the big one. That's the one we hope to see part 3 of the book, the Penn Relay story, on Disney, Netflix, the big screen. So we're going for it, and we're getting a lot of great traction as a result of it.
Well, if you don't, it's never going to happen. Like, I can guarantee you it won't happen.
Right,
so,
right,
I mean, like none of those things kind of scare me. Like when I hear, young people who maybe don't have the marks that that are typically situated for a D1 and then Olympics, but they say, hey, I want to go to the Olympics. I'm like, I don't know, maybe you can. I know of plenty of people who went to Olympics who did not go D1 because they didn't have the marks. And they went to great schools at D2, D3, and AI, and because of maturation and kept at it, they did it. I can only guarantee you that if you don't try, you ain't getting it. That's the only guarantee I can give you. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that. So running against the odds. And I'm assuming you mentioned Amazon bestseller, so I can get it on Amazon and wherever else people buy books now. I don't know where else you buy. Barnes and Nobles.
Barnes and Nobles, Politics and Prose. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah. What is that? Politics? That sounds like a DC thing.
Well, you know what? That's a DC.
Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Okay, all right, okay,
like, yeah. As soon as you said that, I was like, well, that sounds.
It's pretty big here in the DMV.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so let's work through your progression. You go to Howard. If I got it right, you came back and you were teaching and working at in the IUPUI area. So I mean, literally,
I just did a biomedical research. It was a summer.
That's what it was. Okay, got it.
2 summers. Yeah.
So where was the first coaching job? Like the actual, like, okay, I'm not going to medical school, so I'm going to go into coaching. What was the first step?
So I had already, so I was volunteered St. Gabriel's Catholic School. And then I started teaching at Archbishop Carroll High School. That's where I taught physical sciences. And then at the time, I coached their cross country team, but they didn't need any help with their track and field team. So I was pretty discouraged. So I went looking for another school. So I started a track and field club. I was coaching at St. Gabriel's. And I was coaching at a local elementary school, Clark Elementary. So I was coaching 3 teams at one time. And that was kind of the foundation. And I'm so excited that I went that route, because being able to coach on the elementary school level really had me to hunker down on fundamentals, a lot of biomechanics, how to make running fun. And so those are a lot of things that I'm able to carry up the ladder with me. And so I was so fortunate where then I started coaching more middle school, then it became high school. And that's where I ended up going to Eleanor Roosevelt in Greenbelt, Maryland, where we ended up making American history at Penn Relays.
I was going to say, that's a big school. Like, I know that name for track and field. Yeah. Okay. So what was this history? Tell us more about that.
And so we won two pennies, which is the Penn Relay wheel. We beat the Jamaicans in a nail biting race, 4x8, and where there's a photo finish, lean at the line, races going back and forth the entire time. The stadium's on their feet. One side of the stadium is, plastered with the Jamaican spectators. They're blowing the whistles, waving the flags. Yeah. They're saying Jamaica, and the other side is USA. And so at one point, you really thought that they had put the race away. And until about the last 100 meters, they had about 30 meters on us. And we had a young lady by the name of Tasha Stanley who went on to run for UNC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so she, just kind of put her head down coming off the turn. The Jamaican, runner, she had popped her clutch, and she was really, she was really struggling to bring it home. And there was a lean at the line, and and what's amazing is that they had two young ladies on that team that ended up representing their country. Wow. In the next Olympics, or world-class competition. I mean, it was a star-studded field, and so nail biter race, lean at the line, and we came out 400ths of a second on top. And then we ran 3:39 to win the 4x4 in the pouring down rain. Wow. And then we came back the next year and we actually broke the 4x8 national record, which that still stands at 8:43.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Who was Tasha on that team as well?
So Tasha was on that team.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember her UNC because she ran quite well even after UNC. Like she had a career, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Man. Are you, and we don't talk X's and O's in regards to training and stuff, but you mentioned, and if you see him on YouTube right now, you can't imagine this guy weighing 123 pounds. I was fully expecting you to tell me you played football, and you're obviously an athletic person, but 123 pounds ain't gonna get it done on any football team. I'm sure.
I was a late bloomer.
so were you a distance guy through and through, like, and is that kind of your primary coaching?
Yeah, so I was 800 up to 10K, and right, and I was a late bloomer, so I managed my weight pretty well through high school as well as college, and then decided to get more into basketball and weightlifting afterwards, and that other number one sport, eating.
Yeah. Actually, this begs the question, because you said you started cross country so you can be on the basketball team, and then you dropped the 123 pounds. Did you ever make the basketball team?
Never made it.
Okay, I was wondering. First of all, I was waiting for you to give me like a Michael Jordan story of like, I got cut,
right.
but you know what, senior year.
I was the only one who thought I was Michael Jordan. No.
Like no one else saw it.
No one else saw it. Yeah.
You looked in the mirror and you're like, I'm like Mike, and everybody else was like, you were like Mike Cunningham. That's as close to Mike you go get. So you're at Illinois Roosevelt. That's a story. I know that program. It must have been around that time. I remember seeing them at the the track and field news magazines leading the country in the different relays and such. And I probably remember Tasha's name as a high schooler. That's quite amazing. Is that where you were before St. John's, or was there a stop in between?
Yeah, it was a couple of stops in between. So I ended up leaving Roosevelt, and I still feel like I left there a year or two premature. I still had some amazing athletes there, but my wife and I, we had our first child. It was a 40-some minute commute one way. And then I got the offer to coach at the University of Maryland. And so, I was the head cross-country coach at the University of Maryland I was volunteer coach for 1 year, then the head cross-country coach for 3 years, assistant track coach as well. And so I, thought that that's where I really wanted to be. But just with all the politics involved on a collegiate level, and just, it has to be a great fit. I really started missing some of the things I was able to do with my high school, student athletes. I was missing that connection to that impressionable age. I had some amazing athletes at the University of Maryland, and still in contact with them to this day. But as a matter of fact, two of them are helping me to coach at this time. So I don't regret that. It was a great learning experience. But then I wanted to get back to high school, and I wanted to have more wiggle room because I kind of consider myself a serial entrepreneur, and so having the summers off, having the breaks, the winter, I was a recruiting coordinator on top of that, so it was a grind, and I started missing the events for my kids, and it wasn't really who I was, and so I got back grounded, got back to the high school, and then I started teaching and coaching in DC at Woodrow Wilson High School, which is now known as Jackson Reed High School. And then after 6 years there, moved over to St. John's College High School.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you had that experience. Honestly, in my 10 years of coaching, it started on the high school level, and then I think I'm gonna put a broad stroke here. I think like a lot of high school coaches, that may not be true. But as I was a high school coach, it was like, man, I want to coach in college. And I didn't even run in college. So it wasn't like it was some kind of like throwback to me, but it was just like, you want to be better. So you go to the supposedly better level, right? You go to college. And then when you're in college, you're like, well, I better go from D3 to D2, and I better go D2 to D1 and all this kind of stuff. Right. And I think back on my 10 years of coaching, and you could tell my story, Des, honestly, because the way you put it there is exactly how I put it. I had an amazing time, amazing people, amazing athletes. My time at Mississippi State with Al Schmidt as our head coach, and Steve Dudley, Keith Powell, Karen Rademeyer, Houston Franks, the coaching staff couldn't have been closer. I mean, Al Schmidt is still like a dad to me. I love this man. I mean, he gave me my break, right? But when I look back, if someone were to say, hey, name the number one memory from all of your coaching, first of all, that's hard, but there's a distinct one. When I coached high school in Chicago, I coached at De La Salle High School. And we had this kid. This was 1994. So this is 25 years ago. And I've had amazing experiences since then. But this is the memory. I had a young freshman named Robert Threet. I never forget his name. Wow. He was terrible. He was like a 6-minute miler. Okay. He was, when I say terrible, meaning, no one's given awards to a 6-minute miler. Right. And at the JV conference meet, he runs the mile and he runs under 6 minutes. He runs 5:50 something.
Oh man.
Still came in last. The Catholic League was, it was pretty good. I don't know if it still is, but it was pretty good back then in Chicago. And you would have thought he won the gold medal. And I don't mean that by him. Like he was happy. His parents were happy. I was happy. We're all hugging.
Everyone's celebrating. Everyone
going nuts. And it's not like, I mean, we had a good kid. We had one kid, actually 2 other freshmen. One ended up being a state champion in the triple jump, I think. The other one went and became the starting defensive back for Georgia Tech. So, I mean, we had some studs in this class. And everybody was acting like we won the gold medal.
Wow. That kid. I love those stories.
And I've worked with, Trey Hardy, who went to the Olympics. I worked with him. Steve Mullins, Marcus didn't. I mean, just I've worked with the best of the best. Some of the best. Justin Gatlin is a dear friend of mine. I've worked with him. I won't take any credit for him, but I've worked with him. And still, Robert Threet is the number one memory. College is different, and I hear it a lot from high school coaches. I used to teach level 1s for USATF, and the number one question I'd get from high school coaches in the audience would be, "Hey, how do I coach college?" And I'm like, "Why?"
Right.
Why? I know you're teachers. I'm not going to bash that at all, but I'll say you get your summers off, but I know what that entails. It's not as off as we may think and all that kind of stuff. And I know teaching has its struggle, especially today. I get it. But do you want to be away from your house 24/7? Go coach college. You're every weekend you're recruiting. Every weekend you're at a meet.
Oh, man.
there is no off time.
It's a grind. It's a grind all the time.
The national meet is like, we call it June 15th. Guess what? 2 weeks later happens, the start of recruiting for the next class. So you're, 2 weeks, and then 4 or 5 weeks after that, the kids come back for cross country and it never ever
stops.
ends. I thought college coaches were going to wisen up here. Yeah, I'm talking to you, college coaches. In COVID, because they canceled cross country because of COVID, they moved the cross country nationals to March. And I thought, ooh, they're going to wisen up. They're going to go, you know what? This is the right thing to do. Move it to March, do indoor and cross together. I know you got to make some difficult decisions. I get it. But guess what? The fall is much more relaxed. You're not traveling as much. You're not recruiting as much. That second part might not be true, but you get a little bit of a break. I thought college coaches are like, you know what, boys, we have seen the light. Let's get this permanent. And guess what? When you're listening to this, it's the end of October. They're getting real close to, they're in conference and regional mode right now. Yeah. We learned nothing at all.
Nothing at
all.
And it prevents your athletes, your runners from over racing, which, I think is a major issue
100%
in the American system. I mean, starting 100%. Club track all the way through high school to college. I mean, it is,
and I'm not a big believer necessarily that we as high school and college in America, track and field, need to exactly match up to the international scene, because we're talking about a pretty small select number of athletes who even need to think about the international scene. But I believe internationally, cross country is a winter into spring sport. I think like the world cross country championships are like a February, March. I think I know distance people listening right now are yelling at me that I'm wrong, but I think it's around that time. So it kind of matches up with what the actual, international side of it is as well. So yeah, I was really excited. I was like, oh man, this is going to be so good. And then, no, we're back. We're back. And still complaining about it, rightfully complaining about it, but do something about it. So anyway, I love that you had that experience because, first of all, you now know, right? You're not sitting here, 20 years coaching high school going, maybe I could have been a college coach. Maybe I could have done pretty good. Now you're like, you know what? I did it. I was pretty good. And you know what? It just wasn't for me and my family. Yeah, exactly. So
another fun fact, one of those Roosevelt girls actually went to Mississippi State, Dominique Lockhart. I know she led off quite a bit on the DMR. She had a great experience there.
What year is this roughly?
So that would have been 2008.
Yeah, I was thinking, I remember that name after. My last year was 05. I was thinking, I was like, oh yeah, because I still keep, I'm kind of an unofficial Mississippi State alum because I just enjoy.
She worked with Al. She worked with Houston. It's a great experience.
And now the head coach is an 800-meter runner we had on our team. I coached him, Chris Woods. Now he's the head coach. It's just tells me I'm old, is what that really tells me. Is former athletes now the head coach there, but
not at all.
Love them. So what led to coming back to St. John's? You worked at now known as Jackson Reed High School, and then you go to St. John's. What was the transition there? Was it about teaching or what?
Well, no, it was, I got a little burnt out. Jackson Reed is in the public school system, and so I was the head coach. I was the operations and logistics coach and person. I did all the fundraising per season. And it just became, I wasn't enjoying it as much. And I really enjoyed the kids. I really enjoyed, working with my team. My parents were amazing, but I thought that I was actually done coaching for a while. And I finished and resigned after my 6 years. And then a couple of months later, I got a call from the AD at St. John's, and I told him about my story. He said, well, let's just at least sit down and talk. And that one rule that I've always, held on to is that if you have an opportunity to have an interview and have a, conversation, you should at least, take the time to take a look at things. And so as I'm telling him some of the things that really, burnt me out at Jackson Reed, well, he's saying, well, you don't have to worry about that here. You don't have to worry about that here. You don't have to worry about that here. And then I think, at the end of the conversation, because I never I don't want to say I wasn't a fan of private schools, but I love the public school system, and I love what the public school system did for me and my experiences. Just never saw myself coaching in the private sector at this stage in my career. And so we started having conversations about, kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds to, kids who look like me, kids who, when I was in high school, could I have gotten into a St. John's? And St. John's has done a really great job in terms of having diversity within the school. Kids from all walks of life, all financial backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, and on. And I thought, man, this could be a really good fit. Another fun fact about the school is also where Kevin Plank, the founder and CEO of Under Armour.
Oh, is that right?
So they made it clear that we want to have a coach who
wears Under Armour.
Who wears Under Armour and build a national level program. So, yep.
He's building a track right now. We actually are doing that track for Under Armour. They're building an outdoor facility. It's somewhere in Maryland. That's all I know, but I know it's close to DC.
Yep, in Baltimore. I'm very aware. I'm also an Under Armour coach and an ambassador. So I work hand in hand with their run division as well.
Yeah. We probably talked to some of the same people when we were going through the negotiations. Yeah, they were good people. I've really quite enjoyed them. I'm excited for what they're building. They're building something kind of unique, not just I don't want to say not just a track, because I think every track is very special, but something just unique as far as track and field is concerned for their purposes, for their athletes, and their own testing and things like that. I'm excited for them. I'm happy that they're doing it
as well.
Yeah. So tell us about St. John's. It seemed like that was pretty important for you in regards to your public attitude and their private desires. I don't know if I said that right, but but it was important to you to hear about, we have a diverse socioeconomic background, diverse ethnic background, etc. Because I would agree. I grew up in small town Alabama, where in our city we had the public school where I went to school, and then across the way was the private school, and boy, the two did not mix. I mean, it was we didn't like those guys and they didn't like us.
Right.
There were a lot of reasons for that. A lot of you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's a co-ed school. You mentioned Kevin Plank, and you're the girls' head coach. I can infer that it's a public school, or I'm sorry, it's a both gender school there.
Yes,
and
I coach boys and girls.
Oh, you coach? Okay, yeah. How many students are there? Is it 9 through 12, or does it encompass everything? Tell us a little bit more about the school itself.
So 9 through 12, we have about 1,150 students.
Oh, wow.
And almost 900 of those students play a sport. So
wow.
So it's a school where a student athlete is supported with a rigorous academic side, but there's also the support on the athletic side.
What do those other 200 jokers do?
Right. Well, I mean, we have a robust a number of extracurricular clubs, and so I know we have a super competitive robotics club, but you can do everything, including chess. So there's something to do for everyone.
None of those things could you do at my public school.
Right.
Robotics team, they'd have laughed at you. Chess, like, get out of the football field, man. Get out of here.
Right. Yeah. So, and then when I got there, the cross country team was a homogenous team, and the track team was homogenous. It was all white cross country, all black track team for the most part, some sprinkles here and there. And I'm thinking, man, this team does not reflect the population of the school. And I'm proud to say that we went from 20 some runners, where each season we're knocking on 100 to 100 plus runners. So a good amount of the school is out running cross country, indoor or outdoor. So we'll see over 200 students, and so it's a double-edged sword. because I mean that's that much more work that that we have to do to manage those types of numbers. But I mentioned my staff earlier. I mean, I have an amazing coaching staff, and so we're always working towards making sure we're meeting the needs of all of our student athletes.
So what are some of the, I want to say disadvantages, and maybe that's not the right word, some of the obstacles that you have to overcome? Because you mentioned, first of all, you mentioned that many kids, that's
Yeah,
tough, no matter how big your staff is.
right.
But again, and I'm just, so uneducated about DC. When I think of 100, cross country type runners, I'm like, well, where do you run? I mean, I've been outside, I've been in the Maryland area, which is gorgeous. The tree, I mean, it's just gorgeous. But DC, I'm like, well, it's all concrete. That's got its own, and it's very car driven. How do you handle some of those obstacles to actually get stuff done?
Yeah, I mean, we scour the area. We use local parks. We are fortunate where we do have Rock Creek Park next to us. Un the unfortunate side of that is that most of the trails are asphalt, and so and it's a pretty hilly terrain. So we really have to monitor, minimize that type of pounding. We do a lot of strength work, a lot of strength exercise. I've studied other programs, such as like Saratoga Springs, where they're one of the more historic dominant distance programs. They do most of their training on concrete, on pavement, and so I've asked a lot of questions in terms of injury prevention, and I've learned a lot just throughout the years, making sure the footwear is where it should be, orthotics if need be, the strength exercises and the shin area, those intrinsic muscles that needs to be stimulated on a daily or every other day basis. So little things where we have a lot of science involved with the why we do each and everything from the beginning of our practice with an objective all the way to the end of that practice, making sure that we're meeting those objectives. And unfortunately, you learn a lot when you fail. And that's where one of my advantages out of 25 years of coaching, I've failed a lot. Miserably. And so but I've learned a lot. I'm the type of coach where if we fall short of our goals, whatever those goals are, whether if they're individual or team goals, I look at myself in the mirror at the end of the season. I meet with my coaches, and all I want to talk about is what could we have done better as coaches to position our team, to position our athletes. So I mean, we move with a lot of intentionality for each and every practice. We just don't go through those motions. And so I think that's one of my huge advantages as a coach, is that my art of working with kids, but also the science of applying, making that applicable to them as well.
I'm a big believer in coaching education. It changed my coaching career, coaching life, and really it still affects me even today. And I don't coach at all anymore. And just how to teach and think and act, and the art of it. I don't necessarily need the science of it anymore in the position I'm in now, but the art of how you coach people and progress people, I think, is extremely important. It made me think about when you were talking about the things that you have to do in regards to like that park you talked about, and like the paths are asphalted down. You might mention it hilly, and I think, well, you got winters there, so you're not really doing maybe a lot of hill work out there in the winters when it's icy and cold, things like that. So it started making me think, like, when we do coaching education, I told you I taught level 1 for many, many years and did several level 2s. We seem to do coaching education on an ideal basis. Like when we do a distance clinic, we talk about, this many miles and this in the long run, and this kind of repeats, go to the track, do this, then go find you a nice loop over here in the park. And it's like, how many people some people, a good number, don't have that. There are plenty of track teams, successful track teams, that don't have a track.
We don't have a track.
Yeah, well, bingo. Look, I did not know. I did not set that up. But that's why I started thinking, like, maybe there should be more coaching education. And it doesn't have to be inside of level 1 in USTFCCCA's coaching academy. It could be, in today's world, post-COVID world, right? There are tons of great, paid Zoom opportunities for education and things like that. Maybe there needs to be more from, you mentioned Saratoga Springs, which I'm not a distance guy and I've heard of Saratoga.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, they do a lot of theirs on concrete. It's like, man, they need to, it'd be great for people like them and for you that have been successful on concrete to like give a seminar on that. Cause there's someone in LA right now going, man, I want to build a great cross country team, but I don't have any paths or parks. I have nothing but concrete. And, this great coach at such and such is telling me I need to do mile loops on the grass, and brother, I ain't got no. Right. Are we talking about mile loops, man? So it just made me start thinking about like stuff like that. And I segue in that to saying into what kind of coaching education do you and your staff have participated in, maybe even still do?
Wow. I mean, clinics, the coaching education, professional development. I mean, that is just the backbone of my coaching success. And you were mentioning, it's almost like where in math you remember a formula. And I'll never forget this. I mean, I learned this early in geometry, and you got all these theorems and postulates, and you remember them. And as soon as things kind of switch up on that test a bit, you're like, hey, we didn't learn this. And it's the same thing you're saying in terms of if someone has a different footing or different venue or different type of space that what someone may have previously talked about. Well, if you understand, if you understand what you're attempting to accomplish, then you're going to be able to manipulate things to your liking. You're going to be able to manipulate things to what your athletes are about to experience. And so I want to say that I have a really great firm understanding of developing energy systems. And again, what objective are we attempting to accomplish here? And how can we do that on this surface? And so I like you say, I think that's a course within itself of making sure coaches understand how to develop certain aspects of training to get the body to adapt to those stressors, and making sure that that they can manipulate it in the sense of developing those necessary energy systems for the point of periodization appropriately. But when I first started my coaching career, I was using my last dollars to attend coaching clinics. And I'm very fortunate where my wife was super supportive of it. She thought I was nuts, but I make sure that I'm going to 2 to 3 clinics a year. I'll be at the national conventions, USTFCCCA, national. It hasn't been many conventions I have not made. My coaches, they are going to other clinics. They're listening to podcasts. They're just picking up all types of literature, and we have these discussions about what's the latest and greatest, because the one thing that I don't ever want to do as a coach is to say, well, I used to do this workout, so I'm going to give my team this work. It has to wash through the filter first. We might do the same workout, but it has to be a reason behind it. And so having a firm understanding of what you want to accomplish and why, you're going to be able to take a workout that someone gave you that's on grass and transfer that onto a track, or transfer that onto a gravel, parking lot. I mean, whatever it is. And so my high school did not have a track, and I saw how creative Chief was, but he understood our sport. and he understood the science behind it. So we challenge each other a lot with my staff, and we always allow a little bit of intuition and science to dictate.
Yeah, I like that word manipulation, because the fear, the problem that we sometimes have in clinics and camps and stuff is, the speaker is doing the right thing, talking about, the right energy systems or training, whatever, and they give an example workout. And then some of us take that because they're like, oh, well, that's the workout I'll do. And it's like, oh, no. But when you use that word manipulate, it's like, oh, no, manipulate that workout to you got to have some thinking in here, not just cookie cutter, take what I did and go, because it might not work. It probably isn't going to work out for you because it worked for my set of kids and our circumstances. So I like that word of like manipulating, learn, but then learn how to take that into your specific situation. So let's start leading up here to the 2022 season, where you were the National Coach of the Year. I have to imagine, you correct me, but I have to imagine, my experience has been that these guys and gals that are winning these national awards, it's not typically the one season. Obviously, the one season, 2022 for you, was big, but it doesn't happen in a bubble, right? So I have to imagine 2021 is what led up to 2022, and 2020 led into 21, et cetera. Build us up to this amazing season that you had this year. How did it kind of crescendo into this, really amazing honor?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned earlier about the pandemic, that was a huge struggle. We really felt like we came together during that time. It was a tough time for a lot of our, athletes. It was a very tough time for even myself and some of our coaching staff, but we felt like we really rallied together. I mean, we had several virtual meetings. We would have keynote speakers to come in. So we felt like we were doing a great job just staying afloat. We felt like you saw this in the business world, where I mean there was a lot of businesses that crashed, obviously, and there were just some that couldn't keep the momentum going. And those were things that we always talked about. Hey, we know it's tough. We embraced it. Just we talked about this. I think it's called the Stockdale principle, where there was a prisoner of war, and the prisoner of war, those who do the best as being a prisoner of war, is not the prisoner who thinks that they're going to be released the next day, but it's the prisoner who knows that at someday I will be released, but it's probably not going to be tomorrow. And it's just, I have to just bite down hard and endure whatever's going to come and embrace that. And it gives you just more of a taste of reality. It also doesn't drive you crazy, because when that next date comes and you're not released, and that's kind of,
was that your attitude during COVID? Like when you're saying that, and I hate to put prisoners versus COVID, although there were probably a lot of similarities. It did feel like it never ended. Was that kind of you guys' attitude during COVID? It's like, hey, we don't know when this is going to end. It's probably not tomorrow, but we don't know if we're going to get a track season this upcoming spring, et cetera. Was that kind of your mantra for the team and the staff?
Yeah, so and I'm with you too on that too, Mike, where I definitely don't want to make the correlation that those two are nowhere near the same. But I think what it was at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought it was going, we all thought it was going to be something. Hey, we're gonna, we got the best scientists in the world. We're gonna figure this out.
Right.
We're gonna just hunker down for 2-3 weeks. And
we were so naive.
Yeah, we were so naive. And I think that when it really hit us, that this is a lot more serious. I mean, then you could just see the emotional tanks just begin to get depleted. And I'm thinking, man, my emotional tank is being, I also run summer camps, and I had I had almost 1,000 summer campers ready for summer camp coming up. And so I'm balancing, you know, what's happening with my own family,
Right.
and trying to decide, you know, do we keep this summer camp going, and do we refinance our house? And I mean, it was a lot. And so, but when I would get on these sessions with my team, I'm like, man, I got to find this energy. I got to bring it. And so, I vividly remember those days, and then having to call athletes because they just didn't look like themselves when we were meeting, and they didn't have that, you know, that same spirit about themselves. So, I mean, I really, you know, look at how we weathered the storm together. We really leaned on one another. And then that's what gave us this, um, you know, this tighter bond. Um, we lost a little bit of our culture, but it was still enough there to piece it back.
Hmm.
And then we just started building from there. And you know, we also, um, have a lot of pride in the fact that we have a very comprehensive program. So I mean, we're solid in the throws, we're solid in the jumps, you know, distance team, sprint team, and we're gonna rally for each other, you know, and hurdlers. We're gonna make sure that the throwers don't feel like they're on an island, and that the jumpers are, you know, not being supported by the distance runner. So we did a lot of family and team building. You know, at the end of our huddles each day, we say 1, 2, 3 SJC, representing the school, 4, 5, 6 family. And I would always say, look, we're not going to be saying family because it sounds pretty, because it sounds nice. To develop any relationship and to have a strong relationship, it has to be intentional. I mean, you and I both know, you mentioned you've been married 14 years,
Yeah.
and I've been married for 20 years. And I talk about that, you know, my wife and I, we have to be intentional
Amen.
about, you know, moving forward and developing our relationship and working through adversity. And when you have everyone who's on board with that, then you're gonna have a stronger unit. And so we when the pandemic was over, we spent a lot of time doing team activities. So I also, again, lead by example, where when we say family and I want you running for your brother or running for your sister, that we've done the bowling nights, the movie nights, the karaoke nights. We open up with social emotional learning, interactions with one another, whether I ask them questions or I give them, you know, a pitch, and they have to meet different teammates, and they always have to meet teammates that they don't have a conversation with. And then when it gets to the point where they've spoken to everyone, all right, who have you not spoken to in the past week? So just finding nifty and crafty things that our young folks can appreciate. So when they walk into our practice, they know it's not all about running. They know that they're seen as a person, that they get a chance to get some of those emotions out. You know, one of my favorite is, you know, tell a teammate how you're feeling today and use a weather forecast to describe how you're feeling. And
Really?
yeah, and so I mean, those are like little things, you know. What is your biggest fear? And so they're meeting each other, they're learning about each other, but they're also learning about themselves too.
Yeah.
And so we really pride ourselves on that type of intentionality. So when those races are coming down to the wire, or we need someone to even run the 4x4, you know, I get it, you know, and it's a lot of jokes around, you know, that you can't find anyone, and people go hiding in the woods and wherever. You know, not our team. It's, you know, coach, we need this, they need this, you know, what can I do to help? So we're working hard to develop servant leaders, because I mean, part of the reason that we struggle in life and society and in this world is because we're really taught about me instead of about we. And on the back of our shirts, you see a we and you see the greater sign, and then you see me. And, you know, it's all about teaching teamwork. So later on, it translates into community and society.
I always wonder, you know, we focus on track coaches for obvious reasons. I wonder if it's harder on the track side with track coaches and our athletes to convey that sentiment and that truth, right? That we is greater than me, that because we're such an individual sport, right? You still have the 100-meter dash, you still got to run it, and the shot putter is not going to help you run that 100, and vice versa. Versus the football team, where it's like, man, you know, if that offensive line doesn't operate,
Right.
it don't matter how good your running back is, and
Right.
Your quarterbacks, you know, could be all class, and if the receivers can't catch it, don't matter, you know. So I always wonder, like, one of these days I'm gonna do an episode where we have, you know, other sports, football, basketball, and baseball, or something, volleyball and softball here, and talk to them about, like, here's some things that struggle on the track side. How do you get, you know, is that, you know, I kind of imagine, because we're dealing with, especially on the high school level, 14 to 18-year-olds, I kind of imagine they all struggle with it in some form or fashion, to be real frank. So talk to us about this year in 2022 that led to this award, because I'm assuming you didn't get 9th at state, you won state. Do we call it state at DC?
Well, we call it state.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering. Put all your politics aside, whether it should be our state or not.
Right.
It probably should. But it's just weird that it's not in my mind. I think it's not a state because it would be weird to go from 50 to 51. It's not an even number. I think that's literally everybody's psychologically hang up. Same with Puerto Rico. We should just do 2 at the same time. Right. And it'll be 52. We'll figure out the flag, people. We'll figure out how to throw 2 more stars in there. Does that, I mean, come on now. Let's make it happen. Okay, that's as far into politics as I'll ever wade onto this to this podcast here. But so talk to us about state. First of all, let's do this first, because I love having high school coaches from different states to talk about how you actually qualify for the state meet, because it's different in every state. I just love the differences. So what is the actual process, regionals, areas, top 2? Talk to us about how does it occur in DC? How did you get kids to the state meet?
Yeah, so it's an easy process. You just have to register for it.
Okay. Wow. Sign me. I could actually make the state meet one day. Awesome.
So the great thing is, I mean, it's a seeded meet. And most teams have a conference, and then you come and have a second championships for the DC state meet. And what's really neat about the DC state meet is that charter schools, public schools, and private schools can all compete at this one meet. So the issue beforehand would be that you got your private school teams, you got your public school, you got your charter school. Well, they all have leagues of their own. So we initially had that discussion about having the qualifying rounds, but it just didn't make sense. And I'm big into making sure athletes don't over race. So we came up with the system. I mean, it is highly competitive. And you're looking at some of the top runners in the country, you know, coming out of DC. So it was just, it's always a great opportunity to get schools from all backgrounds, and because you have some states that only allow public schools to run into state meet, and then you have some private school championships, but this is one where we can all come together.
So it's kind of, and I don't mean this as a slight. It's kind of like an invitational. Yeah. Okay. And I mean that as no slight, meaning like
great
invitationals out there, and that's must be what works for DC. I mean, DC is different than Texas and Kansas and Illinois, so you have to do what works there. That's cool. I love it. Okay, so tell me about this year then. What happened? How did states go, and what led to this award?
Yeah, so our girls were super dominant at the state championship. We won it by over 100 points. We swept several events. We broke state records in the 4x1, 4x2. We had a distance gal who broke state records in the 1600, 3200. We swept the 100. We swept the 400.
When you say swept, you saying 1, 2, 3, or are you saying
1, 2, 3?
Okay. Do you score 6 or 8?
We score 8.
Yeah, you do score. Okay. When you said sweep, I was like, man, if he's about to tell me they win all 8, that's a
Yeah,
whole different
no.
ball
Yeah,
game. Okay.
1, 2, 3. And
You
then,
won. Go ahead.
then yeah, we went on. We had a couple of teams that won national titles, 4x200 indoors for the girls. Our boys shuttle hurdle won.
The best event.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know you can appreciate that. So we were just we were hitting national marks, and we I think we scored about 212 points. It was the most that ever scored. The next team was 70 some points.
So,
Yeah.
track is unique in the sense of if when is the state meet? Is it end of May or is it end of June?
End of May.
End of
Yes.
May. So if the state meets end of May, there's no possible way that you start practice on, let's say, April 1 and win it in the end of May. Like, you got to prepare. Track will expose you. It just will. Where I could probably take 5 good basketball players and only practice for 4 weeks, and I could probably win some state meets if they're that good.
Right.
If I have, the studs there. So did you win the state meet the year before in 21?
We did.
Did you win it by 100 points?
No.
How many points did you win it by roughly?
Maybe about 40 or 50. I'm kind of guessing.
Yeah. Don't hold you. Don't go fact check them and then yell at
yeah,
him.
please don't.
Just off the top of his head. What I'm wondering is, you have a successful 21. You probably have some practices in the fall of 22, specifically if you're distance for sure, but not sure if you're able to run a year-long program. But as you're building through, was there any inkling as you start track season, like, oh, we won by like 40. I think we're going to double that. I think we're about to crush people. Or was it a surprise as you got there and just everything clicked and everything, you have to get lucky in a lot of these places too. You didn't have to get too lucky, but some breaks happen, maybe you were seeded number 2 in the 4x1 and the number 1 team dropped the baton, things like that. Did you have an inkling like, oh, this is going to be pretty special? Or did it happen at the meet?
Well, a couple of things with that. One, I try not to ever focus on winning itself. I mean, that comes as a byproduct of doing everything else. But as we started to crunch some numbers, we always do an analysis. We started to understand that we're putting something special where this is probably going to be one of the most dominant performances that anyone has ever witnessed. And it's going to be legit competition here as well. And so we did start seeing the writing on the wall that if we came out and competed the way we were capable of, that we knew that some special things would happen. And I really pride myself, our staff, we really pride ourselves on, peaking at the right time. I know some coaches don't believe in peaking. I will always be a huge fan of peaking. I feel like I've won more championships because we were the most prepared team and not necessarily the better team. And
oh, we had a small hiccup here. We'll wait for Coach Des to come back on here. It's probably my internet, not his. There we go. All right, you're good. You talk about your love of peaking, which I think that should be a shirt, by the way. I love peaking. That's
I love it. Yeah.
Keep going.
And I was just going to say that I feel like we've won more championships by being the most prepared team, versus being the better or the best team. And we were just emotionally, mentally, and physically and physiologically prepared for that part of the season, especially on the girls' side. And it really showed at the end of May, leading all the way through nationals in June.
How do you keep, we're talking about 14 to 18-year-old girls here. I remember when I was that age as a boy, motivation and, teamwork and things like that, they were important, but, I'm still 17, 18 years old. As you're progressing through the meet and you start this big lead, and at some point, kids are smart and coaches are smart. At some point, the meet's over. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter what happens. We're winning. We're up by 60. If everything goes terrible, we'll win by 1, but we can't lose. How do you, as a high school coach working with 14 to 18-year-old girls here, how do you keep them, fully pressed on the gas, right? Because
Yeah.
at some point they had to be like, Coach, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, I know I still want to win because I'm, maybe I'm in the 200. I want to win, but the girl who's like, I could get fourth, or I could just coast to eighth, and it don't matter because we still gonna win. How do you keep them engaged to, be fully engaged and
Yeah.
fully present and 100% all the way through the end of that 4x4?
That's a great question, Mike. I just want to say that, I mean, pride.
Mhm.
We always talk about being pride. How you do anything is how you do everything in life. And I want to see them apply that on the track. And I want to see them apply that when they're off the track. And I don't think we were ever really looking at the score. Only time score became a factor is when the announcers announced the score. But everyone was pretty much locked in, ready to do their best at their particular and respective events, and they had their assignments. And so, we created this culture, we created this buy-in, which was just super important, that they learn this value as a life lesson. As when they graduate, that we're seeing some of these same qualities about them and other things that they're doing. So there was just no doubt about it when it was their turn to step up to the ring or on the line, that they were going to be ready to give their very best, no matter what the score of the meet was.
And I have to imagine you and your staff led by example, meaning you didn't coach less because the
Oh,
meat
yeah.
was in the bag. It's like, no, we used to, hey, you did not,
Yeah.
you got to pick up that elbow in the shot put. You
Yep.
can't drop it. It's like, Coach, it's over. We got that.
Right,
I don't
right.
care. You still got
Yeah.
to do the right thing, right?
No,
Yeah.
we were pumped all the way through.
I love that. Did you have any inkling after that meet and after the national meet successes? You're like, you know what? I think I might have a shot at the National Coach of the Year award. Did you have any inkling there at all?
I never think about those types of things. To be honest with you, I don't feel like I'm the one deserving to get those things. I mean, I know I'm at the helm, and of course, when something doesn't go well, I'm the first one that people come to find.
Yeah, you get
But
whatever the opposite of the National Coach of the Year award
right,
is for
right,
that.
exactly.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I have, again, I mean, I call it the dream team of a staff, some close and personal friends who are coaches, my team, the student athletes, they are amazing. My parents are amazing. And so, I mean, I'm very lucky to be in the situation that I'm in. This is a hobby for me, and I absolutely love it. And I'm even shocked that I get a stipend for doing it.
Well, I don't know how much you make, but you deserve more. And I don't
Yeah.
mean because you won I don't mean it because you won the meet and you won the award. I will say that to any track coach. I don't care what you're making, you should be making more. So before we get, because I do want to get to the staff, because you don't score 200 points at your state meet and not score at pretty much every one of the disciplines that we have coaches for. So we're going to learn more about that staff here in a second. But I do want to know, what was it like when you were notified from the USTFCCCA that you were the girls national coach of the year? Were you notified first that you were the DC girls coach of the year and then later the national, or did that all happen at the same time? And just what went through your mind when you found that out?
Yeah, so I received a message from Christina, with the USTFCCCA, and I was actually in Jamaica celebrating my 50th birthday,
Nice.
and with a lot of family and friends. And I was on my way to get a massage, and I ended up just like jumping up for joy. And I, contacted my wife to inform her, send her the text, because initially I was getting these calls from New Orleans, and
Right. You're like, I don't
I'm
know.
thinking it's spam, and then I get the text from Christina, and I was excited to receive that.
So what you're
And
saying is it's good to be Coach Des, because wait a minute, you're in Jamaica. going to get a massage, and you get the award. Like, come on, that's the trifecta, man. Come on. Holy cow.
That was a great moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the DC coach of the year or the national? Did they do both at the same?
That was the national.
Yeah. So what went through your mind? I mean,
yeah. I just, from a place of humility, I just really, felt a little bit of imposter syndrome.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah. And it was just hard for me I mean, even as we're talking about this, it just still hasn't sank. I don't have this attitude like, yeah, I should have gotten it. I, deserve to get it. I'm living my best life coaching, and I'm only as good as my last season. So, I'm in cross country right now, and yeah, I do want to celebrate that with my coaches, and I like to think that I do a great job of recognizing them and taking them out to dinner or having a dinner in my backyard, and just always showing appreciation and gratitude for their friendship, for their commitment. They're making a lot of sacrifices. They help me to make more sacrifices. I mean, iron sharpens iron, and the energy that we have as a staff is just amazing. So when I'm getting this award, it just doesn't fully feel right. I feel like that, and this will be something I'll throw into the ring, that you recognize programs, recognize coaching staffs, where it's, hey, coach, who else is on your staff so we can duplicate this award? And so that's where I am.
I agree with that 100%. We ran a Gill Coach of the Year program for a while. I was heading that up, and so I'm a huge believer and proponent, mainly on the college side here, the conferences, that instead of giving out a coach of the year, give out the program of the year. Because I agree, you ain't winning a conference title, you ain't winning a state title with one coach. You're just not. I mean, name it. You can't, cross country, I guess you can have one distance coach and you can win nationals at cross, but track and field, sorry, not happening.
Right.
On the coach of the year that we ran, the reason we kept it as a coach of the year program is we wanted to recognize an individual coach that did something amazing. Because there can be St. John's could have 7, 14, and 15-foot pole vaulters on your team. You don't win the state meet because you don't have any sprinters and jumpers and throwers, but it's like, wow, that pole vault coach developed 7 15-foot. That's unheard of. No high school has that. That coach should be coach of the year.
No, that makes sense.
Or a coach that fundraised $2 million for a new facility. Bingo, you should be coach of the, you've done something heroic, right? But I do tend to think even these awards, and this is where, I got one more question, then we're going to jump into this amazing staff. But I do think of these awards, they should actually, in my opinion, should be the coach, the program, the staff of the year. Your individual, staffs of the states, and then your national staff of the year, because you just ain't getting it done on your own. And if you are, you ain't up for this award because you ain't winning it. So Desmond, talk to us about when you got notified, after you got notified of being the National Coach of the Year. What kind of fun, cool thing maybe happened? Maybe the mayor of DC called. That'd be kind of a big deal. The mayor of DC calls, right? Besides being a guest on this podcast, of course, what other kind of cool thing, fun thing has maybe happened since you got named the National Coach of the Year?
Well, we have a mantra with the team, and it's also with our staff. If one of us win, we all win. So to share this moment with my staff, it definitely, they know that this award is also in their dedication as well, due to the hard work that they've put in. So we definitely feel like we all have, are a part of this award. We all are having success with this, and then it's also just a great feeling with family and friends, and my mother, who's able to experience this. And it's kind of where it's come full circle when she said, look, whatever you do, make sure you're the best.
Yeah.
And so for her to see me accomplish those things, and my wife and kids were just super ecstatic. And so just to share this moment with my staff, my family, my friends, that's all I need. I don't need a lot of notoriety. I don't need any notoriety. I want to be a part of those precious moments. And I do consider this to be a precious moment for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's kick it, man. Let's hear the staff. I'm expecting. Well, I'm not expecting. I already know these guys and gals on your staff are rock stars because you won 200 points. Come on. Yeah. They're working and doing it right with 14, 18-year-old kids and making positive impacts. Yeah. Tell us who, start with you and what you coach for the program, what events and such, and then lead us through the rest of the staff here.
All right. So I coach, I coach all events,
you're high school coach. I knew that. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Right. All events. And I have to know all events well. And because I always want to, just talk shop with the regimen that's put together for all of the events. We have a young buck who's on the staff. He is one of my former club runners. His name is Michael Lemon, and he is our sprints coach. And he also is a coach that has the characteristics to be a head coach. And so we're kind of keeping that in mind that he's that we're planting the seeds for him to take over the program once I decide to call it. I have a phenomenal hurdle coach, Zach. We call him Coach Zach Ray, and he is one of my former Maryland athletes. I was very fortunate to coach him in the 400-meter hurdles. He was an NCAA regional qualifier, but was able to do a lot with him in terms of preparing him for the long hurdles. And so he's our hurdle coach. And then we have a young lady, Urana Joseph, who is she's also our jumps coach. Our jumps program carried a lot of weight for us. She is from St. Lucia, and she also competed for the University of South Florida, and she just has held multiple multi-event records in the HEP. And so she's kind of the mama of the team, and also a good friend of mine. We got two phenomenal distance coaches, Tim McMahon. We've coached together for over 2 decades. And wow. I actually coached his son as a part of one of those club runners when we first started back in the days. His son, Quentin McMahon, I actually got a pretty funny story about this, where we had coached maybe about 15, 16 years together. And he coached with me at Maryland. And, he's an engineer by trade, very science-based. So we get along really well, and we don't always agree, but we figure things out. So after we left Maryland, he was a bit burnt out, and we both were a bit. And so I wasn't sure what was going to be the next steps for me. But then eventually I took on the Jackson Reed job, and he said to me that, dude, I'm done coaching. I'm going to become a beekeeper. And and he loves doing it. As a matter of fact, he's in Florida now on a trip. But then he says, dude, the only way I'll ever coach again is if you coach at St. John's. And that's the school where both of his sons went to school. And his one son, Quentin, was the school record holder. He ran 15 and some change. And I coached at Jackson Reed for those 6 years. And then, man, I could not wait to make that call. And I said, dude, you got your stopwatch? You ready? And he's
time.
He's like, dude, what do you mean? And I said, I'm the new head coach. He could not believe it. All I heard was, holy shit.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so he's back in action with me.
He thought he had it safe because he was even naming the school, not just you coaching, but you
right.
got to be at St. John. He was
Yeah, be
like,
at St. John's.
he's like,
Yeah.
buy
Oh
that
yeah.
lottery ticket. It
Yeah.
ain't never
Right.
coming
Right.
in.
Yeah. Yeah. So so he came aboard, and when we first started, the school had no championships on the girls side, not cross country, indoor, outdoor. In our first year, we swept it. We had the triple crown. We won cross country by a few points. We won indoors by a few. We won outdoors, and that was a special moment. I got a good buddy who runs a super competitive program at Elizabeth Seton. Omar, Coach Omar, and they had won it 10 years in a row for on the track side. And then we had a conference team, Bishop O'Connell, who had won it 11 times in a row. So we had our work cut out for us, but Tim was super instrumental in helping us to get this going. Gabby Grepsky, who was a former head coach at a couple of prominent private schools in DC, but she also went to a middle and long distance powerhouse program, which is Bronxville and high school in New York. And so she's coming with a plethora. And that's the one thing I always say, that I have a bunch of coaches that could actually be head coaches.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And then I have another former 800-meter athlete from the University of Maryland, Ariana Tabatabayu, who she's young, she's energetic. She was a 400, 800 gal. So she did a lot with our middle distance group. And then we had a great throws coach, Joe Staten, who was just always consistent with our throwers, very laid back, loved being around them, people person, who one of the events at the state meet that we all celebrated with was the young lady who won the discus. We didn't see it coming, and we knew she would be competitive, but I mean, she showed up on that day, and I mean, we all celebrated.
Wow, man, that's awesome. I love it. Shout out to all you guys and gals, because it takes every one of you, from Joe in the throws, Tim, Ariana, Zach. It doesn't happen. It literally does not happen without everybody coming together.
And I got to also shout out our operations manager, Thelma Ortega, who just did a great job with all the logistics with the team and a lot of the grunt work, making sure that we can spend time coaching while she was taking care of a lot of those other things that help to keep everything well oiled and moving forward.
I love it. Yeah. We all need a Thelma in our life. Honestly, we all do. We can't live without it. Well, Desmond, to wrap up today, to have a successful program like this, it's one thing. It takes a staff that's kind of table stakes. You have to have a staff that's committed to working together, a staff that's committed to lead by example. If you want your throwers to watch the 4x4, well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Coach Joe Stanton is paying attention to the 4x4. He's leading by example, and all the other, combinations we could put there. But you also have to have support. You mentioned the parents of your team, administration. Someone's got to drive the bus. Give us kind of a rundown of just some people that were super, and I'm going to give you all leeway here. You're going to forget someone. Everybody always does. It doesn't mean
I I'm feeling the pressure.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I just want to get a sense for, for a program, a coach's program that's listening right now, who's like, I want to be a good program, but I just can't figure out what to get over the hump. It takes, if you think about this puzzle, it takes all these pieces to come together. And one of those pieces is administration. One of those pieces is a good booster club, parent club piece. Athletes is a piece, coaches ed. It's all these puzzle pieces. So I just kind of want to give a full round picture that while you are amazing and your coaching staff is amazing and your athletes are amazing, that's not enough. It takes these other pieces of the puzzle. What are some of those other pieces for you there at St. John's?
Yeah, so I mean, so two guys who did our auxiliary training with our strength and performance training, Dominique Graham, Coach Lou, and you know, these are pretty straightforward guys that they understand our sport, they understand what we need in terms of the performance training side of things. Our parents always asking, how can I help? What do you need? Making sure that I mean, little things like having snacks and if it's going to be a long day, sandwiches and just to keep the fuel there. If we need a team tent, you know, fundraising, there's a lot of support around that. And so, and we have an amazing principal who makes it out to most of our championships. Chris Themistis, he brings his family out sometimes. But you know, you can always count on him being around to support the student athletes. And so it's a community. It's a community that we love, that has grown tremendously. And you know, we don't have any intentions on stopping soon.
Yeah. Yeah. How many seniors did you graduate from this team?
Oh, let me see. We did not graduate many seniors.
Oh man, that just
We did graduate two young ladies that I feel like they were the backbone of developing the culture that we need to be. They weren't the most talented, but you didn't know that because they made up for it in other ways. They were super successful. They took first and third in the 100-meter hurdles. Amina Martin and Kylie Ritz. And so I'll always say that they were the ones that gave me that they ignited me to want to do more for the program. And now one is at Barnard competing for Columbia. She's in her freshman year, and then Kylie's at Fordham. And so we're traveling to Van Cortlandt Park this upcoming weekend, so we'll get a chance to see Amina and some of our other former athletes who are competing. So it's I mean, I can name so many more young ladies. The shot put, the discus thrower, she was also a basketball player. She was our school valedictorian. She's also going to play basketball. She might throw a little bit for Brown. And so you know, I'm super proud of the group that we have and the contributions and sacrifices that everyone has made.
I mean, that's just an overachiever. State champ, basketball player, valedictorian, right. Goes to Ivy League to play basketball, and is probably going to throw. Young lady, you put me to shame. I haven't done that my whole life, and you just did that in a year, man. That's quite amazing.
And she's funny, and she's super funny. I won't tell her that because then she'll keep going and going. But
yeah, we're just gonna act like she's not funny. She has to have some little flaw. You're not funny. All right, you're very smart. You're gonna cure cancer one day, but you're not funny. Well, Coach Desmond here, thank you so much. You know, this has been an absolute blast. You know, one of the most valuable things you can ever give me and us here at Gill Athletics is your time. You know, we went back and forth on getting your time. I know it's super busy time. Like I said, you're going to Van Cortlandt this weekend. You're in the middle of cross country season, and we're going to see each other. You're going to be in Denver, right?
I'll be in Denver.
Man, I can't wait to hang out with you in Denver and you know, get to meet you face to face. The USTFCCCA convention is literally one of my most favorite things in the entire world. So so I'm so happy that you joined us here today to give us some of your background and, you know, just to celebrate, honestly, to uplift and honor what you've done as you lead the St. John's College High School and more. You know, your story's not done. I know you talked about like, well, you know, maybe was it Mike? I think it is Mike Lemon. Maybe he's the next head coach. Yeah. Sorry, Mike. This dude ain't done. You keep learning because it's going to be a while, but that's okay because it's going to make it that much sweeter when you do become the next head coach there at St. John's. But Desmond, thanks again for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mike.
So I'm going to see him in Denver in December, and I'm going to see you next week. If you didn't catch the other two episodes, this is kind of like I said, a three-parter that we did here. Go back. If you know, we didn't actually define USTFCCCA. So if this is your first time hearing that's the United States Track and Field. See, I knew I was going to mess it up. Track and field coaches and cross country
coaches.
Sam is going to obliterate me. We're going to start that all over again. I'm not cutting that out. The USTFCA, the United States Track and Field and Cross Country Coaches Association.
There we go. There we go. Nailed it.
They do a lot for our coaching body out there, right? For college and high school. Go back 2 weeks ago, episode 176. We had the CEO, Sam Seams, had him on. We talked about his background and then really jumped into what the USTFCCCA does for coaching and for the coaching body. It's highly important. I highly recommend you go back and listen to that. And then last week in episode 177, we had Tim Byrne, the head coach of, I'm going to obliterate it every time I say it, Tim, the Salesianum High School up in Delaware. He was the boys coach of the year. And if you're interested, last year's boys and girls national high school coaches of the years, Shelton Irvin down at Summer Creek High School in Texas, and Mike McCabe up at Union Catholic in New Jersey.
Oh, that's my guy right there.
That's, great people, right? I mean, come on. Great people hang around great people. I mean, that's really the crux of it all. You could go back and listen to them, because I think what you'll notice if you go back and listen specifically to those four, Desmond today, Tim last week, and then Shelton and Mike from last year, these are highly successful high school coaches here. And I think if you go back, you'll start picking out some commonalities. You'll notice that not almost every one of them was really eager to talk about their staff over themselves. Every one of them. If you notice, I'm having to draw out Desmond's story. Desmond's quick to talk about his staff. That's the same with Mike and Shelton and Tim. There's other commonalities. Coaching education comes up. Was surprising to me because I didn't coach in the high school level for very long, so I don't have this experience. Is a lot of these guys talk about the coaching education amongst their staff, getting together and hearing from the throws coach. What do you do? Okay, well, I'm thinking about doing, how can I translate that over to my sprints group, and the distance coach, and what is he and she doing? So there's a lot of commonalities inside of that too. So I highly recommend you go back and listen to all four of these coaches of the year, because they're awesome. They're awesome people, awesome staffs, and they've done really some amazing things. So shout out to the U.S. Marines for sponsoring the USTFCCCA High School Boys and Girls Coach of the Year. We'll see you guys in Denver. See you next week. Have an awesome week. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Peace.